Hello, my name is Ezequiel Martinez, and this is my presentation for my machine learning final project. So here's an overview of the project. The whole point of the project is to attempt to develop a model that would predict a student's final exam score. I was given 10 semesters of student data to act as a data set from a professor and a student. This data consisted of of 5 student test scores, that being 2 midterm scores and 3 quiz scores, and of course their final exam score. I split the data into a 90-10 split where 90% will be the training set and 10% will be the test set. I used the mean square error loss measure, which is relevant to this to bring up because to get the practical measure for this loss you would have to take the square root of it. So here's an example here. If an actual exam score of a student was not 90%, the model would predict somewhere between 70 and 90% if it required an E out of 100. So you would take the square root of the 100, and then the 10 points would be the average that the model would get incorrect. It would be the range per se. There's 3 models that we used. We use linear regression model, K nearest neighbor model, and also a neural network model to attempt to accomplish this. So the first step of this whole process was the data pre-processing. The data that was given to me was quite cumbersome. It was packed with a lot of nuanced data, and it was separated into different CSVs. So I wanted to organize it up, and on the left you can see kind of an example of what it came out to be. It was basically organized into the order that the tests were assigned. So first the students would get quiz 1, and then they had midterm 1, and then quiz 2, and then midterm 2, and so on. It is also using their raw data, no curve data or no scores given from rebuttal. The 6 columns are quite fair to see. On the left 5 were the features, and then the right was the label. Additionally, the quiz grades were out of 25%, so those had to be normalized. I didn't want to have the model skewed towards the midterm grade, and instead I wanted it to treat all the scores as equal as possible. And I've only only had about 1,000 data points, so it was a relatively small data set, but I tried to see what I could do with it. So the first model to be tried was a basic linear regression model. We tried this one first because from class I remember it's best to try with this one because it's simple. This model was implemented with no machine learning libraries, so follow the styles of the homework that were given in class, and of course we use a normal equation to find the best weights. This model was tried in 2 lights, first without a nonlinear transformation of the data, and during training received an error loss of 163.9, which equated to 12.8 points. So to reiterate, the model would make an incorrect guess on the final exam score by 12.8 points on average, and on the test set, it made an incorrect guess of about 14.2 points on average. Then the model was tried again with a nonlinear transformation on the data. It was a pretty simple nonlinear transformation. It was just a square of a original feature, and it didn't show much of a difference. It actually performed slightly worse on the training set, but slightly better on the training set, but slightly worse on the test set. But not much of a difference at all. The next model we tried was the symmetric model, the K nearest neighbor model. It was implemented with PyTorch, so this took a different approach than the homeworks in the class, but I feel like it was good practice to get some experience with some machine learning libraries. We used the L2 norm for the distance calculation, and we started off with K equals 3 because I learned in class that was one of the better heuristic approaches, and then I tried other Ks for experimentation, intuition, just wanted to see what I would get. So, not to go in each one of them in detail, but we can kind of notice that this model performed worse than the linear regression model, with the E out averaging between 15 and 16 points incorrectly guessed on average, but performed better on the training set on average. And and the model performed better as K increased, which was kind of cool to see. It performed better on the test set, but performed worse on the training set. So it's kind of seemed to be, I guess, the opposite of overfitting. Kind of seemed to converge to a better result. The third model that we attempted was a neural network. This model was implemented with PyTorch, again, to get more practice with the machine learning library. It had a depth of 3 layers, 2 hidden layers and 1 output layer, of course. We used the ReLU function as the activation function, and you can see the ReLU function there. We picked this one because it was good to help conform to any non-linearity in the data and to avoid vanishing gradients that could be found or approached during the training sequence. And I trained this over 1,000 epochs, and I reported a loss over every epoch, so we can see the error loss converging, right? So here in the bottom, we can see the results of that. We can see that the error loss kind of already started off a little bit better than the other model and than the other models at a 13.6 points off on average of this miscalculation, and it progressively got better over every 100 epochs or so. And then at the end of the training here, we can see that our EIN converged to be 12.1 points on average, which was actually the best so far. And on our EOut, it's also the best EOut that we have gotten so far at 12.9 points on average. So that was interesting to see. So here is my final takeaways and my reflection on the whole experiment so far, final project. Clearly, the neural network model has performed the best. This kind of leads me to believe that there must be some nonlinearity that is present in the data that the symmetric model, the KNN, and the linear regression model was not able to find. So that perhaps is why it performed the best, even though there was not a lot of data, right? You would suspect a more complex model to perform worse on smaller amounts of data, but this model perhaps performed better because there's a distinct nonlinearity, perhaps. What had me worrying since the beginning of this project was kind of that the data may have some sort of bias, right? It may not be, I guess, perfectly independently identically distributed. There may be inconsistencies between semesters from the way the class was taught, the way it was structured, the way that the homeworks were given out or assigned, and it may have led some students or some semesters to overall have a different experience, and that could have led with some of the inaccuracies that we were eventually came to. So yeah, that's the final point, is that the data does not seem extremely predictable. Right, 12.9 points miscalculated on average is pretty significant. I feel like I would much prefer a model to be much more accurate than that. But at least it's only off by 1 letter grade. It's a whole letter grade, but it's only 1 letter grade. But the models do seem to kind of trend to a specific average where they are in between, the models are guessing incorrectly in between 12 and 15 points on average. So there does seem to be some kind of trend here, which may warrant future study, who knows.